We've been building all sorts of Apple ecosystems here the past few months. We've talked cheap, we've talked useful, we've talked student, but the question keeps coming up, well, Gary, you have all these great recommendations, but what do you personally use? Well, good news. Today I'm going to walk you through my own personal Apple ecosystem and why I use the specific options that I do. So why is that? Let's find out. What's up, everyone? I'm the Everyday Dad, and if I can figure it out, you can figure it out. With all of the tech that Apple makes, it can be really hard and really confusing to try and figure out what pieces inside of that system you should buy to make your own ecosystem. Before we start diving into my parts, I do want to define what I mean when I say ecosystem. For me, my personal technology ecosystem is made of all the things that I use on a daily basis, whether it's work, play, study, buying cameras. Those are like the only things I do with my life. It's all part of that. Now, my actual tech ecosystem includes things like my monitor, my gaming PC, the Android phone that I also use. I don't only use Apple tech, but I do primarily use them because as of right now, what I've built is the most convenient and best functioning system that I can find. And because this is my Apple ecosystem, that's what we'll cover. But if you were curious about every single thing that I use ever, let me know in the comments below and maybe we'll do some kind of like a big studio tour to show you all of it. The second a gadget or device becomes a hassle or doesn't pull its weight, I will stop using it. I don't care what brand it is, I'll just no longer use it. I mean, remember, not that long ago, I left Apple to wholly use Windows for video editing because of some operating system problems I was having. And that's beginning to rear its ugly head again, but that's a video for a different day. Now that I've laid out why we're talking about this today and what I consider an ecosystem, what are the specific things that make up my own Apple ecosystem? Since I'm kind of a computer dork and obsessed with those things, let's start there. My personal computer that I use for both my daily job and all my TikTok, YouTube, Instagram stuff is the M1 Mac Mini. This is the 16GB unified memory, 1TB solid state drive model, and I think this is probably the best computer ever made. Yes, I say that even though I currently and have on hand both the base model MacBook Pro 14 and the M1 Max MacBook Pro 16. Both of those are objectively more powerful than the Mac Mini, but due to some issues that I'm having with external storage and macOS Monterey, I basically can't use them. And yes, I'm irritated with this enough that I will have a standalone video talking about that problem. It'll be either this week or next week, so stay tuned for that. The Mac Mini by itself though, even with all the latest computers out there, this is still the most convenient computer when you are working in a home office. You get all of the ports that you could ever want, USB-A, USB-C, HDMI, headphone jack, Ethernet. The only thing that I do need to supplement here is an SD card reader, but that's not that big of a deal. I also only use a single 32-inch monitor, which I cannot believe how much I spent on that monitor, but I only use one. Though, the nice thing about the Mac Mini, unlike the other initial M1 Max, is you could get one 6K monitor out from the Thunderbolt and another 4K monitor out from the HDMI port. So this is a lot more versatile than maybe a MacBook Air or a MacBook Pro 13. Power-wise, I still haven't had a task that's needed more power than what this can provide. I mean, I'm still using rather rough HEVC codecs from my cameras, what I'm using right now, and that causes issues for my custom-built PC with a Ryzen 5800X and an NVIDIA 3080 Ti graphics card. That monster machine vastly outscores even my M1 Max MacBook Pro, but it has problems the second I bring in these video files. The Mac Mini uses them no problem, and I never have to worry about slowdowns or hiccups. In the render, it will go a little slower than the newer MacBooks, but when my videos are rendering, I'm always working on the thumbnail or some other task anyway, and that task is never done before the render's done. So all of that power of the M1 Pro and M1 Max lineup, it's kind of wasted on me. See, there is absolutely a thing as too much power, and that can lead into that power becoming unusable. Usable power is the name of the game, and the Mac Mini has some of the most usable power that I've ever seen. Plus, to this day, I've still not heard the fans on this thing turn on. When I'm playing WoW Classic on both the 14 and the 16-inch MacBook Pros, the fans will turn on after a short period of time. Now, it's nothing too distracting or anything like what the Intel-based MacBooks used to sound like, but it's still there, and I have started to very much prioritize a quiet running office during my work days. So it's very, very important to me that my tech just be quiet. And whatever thermal magic they figured out with the Mac Mini, it's really hard to give that up. The last thing I want to touch on with the computer before we move on is how nice it is to have a dedicated Ethernet connection. Yes, you can always get a dongle or adapter with that functionality built in, but team, I gotta tell you, I'm getting real sick of having to buy extra stuff after I've already purchased an expensive computer. I've mentioned this before, but my home Wi-Fi and my work's VPN do not play well together, so this Ethernet port is clutch, and it's kind of like a requirement for me. Dang, that's like 800 words about the main computer. So we'll try to pick up the pace here. I really like the Mac Mini. I have been working from home for just about 2 years at this point, and from time to time, I do still need to travel. And when I do travel, I prefer to have a MacBook by my side. Previously, that MacBook was an i5 Intel MacBook Pro 13. That was replaced by the M1 MacBook Air, and that has since been replaced by the base model MacBook Pro 14. I don't want to oversell this, but holy cow, this is like my perfect laptop. If only there weren't the external storage problems, I would call this my perfect computer. That MacBook Pro 13 from 2018 with that i5 Intel chip was all of the power that I needed during a long duration work trip at the end of 2019, and it performed flawlessly. I was able to keep running the YouTube channel in 4K with no problem. There were some things that I wish it had built into it to make my life easier, and the 14-inch MacBook Pro comes with basically every single thing that I've ever wanted. You get HDMI, you get built-in SD. Much like I said with the Mac Mini, you don't need to buy any additional crap to make this work. I heart this laptop. This version is the base model with the 8-core M1 Pro processor, 16 gigabytes of unified memory, and the 512 gigabyte solid state drive. If I were to complain about one thing, and it's my fault, it's not the laptop's fault, I wish I'd bumped this up to at least the 1 terabyte, maybe 2 terabyte model, and as they are almost impossible to find right now, I guess I'll just have to make do with this one. I've already taken this on a 3-day work trip about a month ago. This is about as close to a portable desktop computer as you are going to find. The M1 Pro is objectively more powerful than the M1 Standard, so it's got more speed than my Mac Mini, and when I'm traveling, I generally don't carry around my big RAID enclosure. In that instance, I don't have to worry about those external connection issues. This size is perfect for working in tight places. Try using a 16 or 17-inch laptop on an airplane. That always sucks. And the 14 isn't that much bigger than the previous 13-inch MacBook. It fits in any of the backpacks or cases that I might be bringing along with me to work, and much like working without a ton of room, I also hate having to carry around big, heavy computers with big, heavy bags. This easily slips right into any backpack, and I'm good to go. Like I said, you get all of the connections you could need, and that HDMI comes in so clutch if you are presenting something to clients or customers. The display is also absolutely gorgeous. I will say though, if I were to need to do another long-term, like month or so business trip, I would probably buy an external display again like I did the last time whenever I got where I was going, because the display is great. It's one of the best displays that I've ever seen on a laptop. I personally can't work for long periods of time hunched over a laptop screen. I do find the MacBook Pro 16 better in this regard. That extra screen real estate, it doesn't sound like much on paper, but it makes a huge difference in use. Battery life is good, but not great. It's great compared to everything else, and I would say it's only good when compared to the previous M1 MacBooks, which those will run out of steam long after you've run out of steam wanting to work from them. Personally, I've had no battery issues so far, but I can tell it drains faster than my MacBook Air. So if you need the absolute best battery life above all else, I'd probably look at that MacBook Air or at the MacBook Pro 13. Wow, we've spent like 80% of the video talking about computers, so what else? What's some other stuff that I use on a daily basis? Well, my main phone is the iPhone 13 Pro Max because I'm kind of a sucker for battery life, if you hadn't noticed. Everything else about this phone is just icing on the cake, but I primarily carry this strictly for the longevity. I would much rather use the iPhone 13 mini, but even with its updated lifespan, I don't know, I have a mental block or something that makes me feel like I need to ration its life when I'm using it, and it's unenjoyable to use. The 13 Pro Max also has the best looking display that I've ever seen on a phone. That fast refresh rate ProMotion looks really nice, and while I was on team who cares about fast refresh rates prior to the 13, and I have to say that as a disclaimer for the rest of my life, because if you change your mind about something in the tech world, well, you can't. People are only allowed to have one opinion forever, Gary. The refresh rate, you can really tell the difference once your eyes are used to this faster and smoother operation. So when you go back to something like the 13 mini or even my iPad mini, it's not a deal breaker, but you can tell things are a little choppier. The cameras on the 13 Pro Max are also incredible. You've heard me say this in its specific video that I don't even bring my big cameras with me anymore because this is all that I need or want for my family camera. I get that some people have the desire to have everything captured in the most ultra high quality, but a few months ago, I'd found a cable to connect my ancient iPhone 4S to my computer, and I was able to watch videos of my son from 8 years ago. He's 9. It wasn't the best quality, but it was good enough even that long ago, and I was able to really get into the emotions of that moment. If I'd needed to break out a big camera, I didn't even know how to use a big camera like 8 years ago, so that would have sucked. But I could do that now to make the quality a little better, but more than likely, I just wouldn't take the video because it has that included hassle. I'm much happier to have a memory at all than have it in slightly better quality and just potentially not do it. And the battery life, no kidding, lasts me 2 whole days at a time. And that's not 2 whole days of scrimping and saving. That's 2 whole days of normal use, and then when I get to the charger, it still has like 15% left. The longevity of this phone is out of this world, and it's good enough by itself to be a purchase decider, which it absolutely was for me. When it comes to iPad, I only use one iPad on a regular basis, and that's my iPad Generation 8. And that's because it's my teleprompter that I'm looking at, like I'm even looking at it right now. If you're watching a video that I've scripted, I read off of this iPad like every single day. If I'm slammed and I have a ton of meetings in a day, I will break out the iPad mini with its ultra wide angle camera because it's so easy to just plop that down anywhere on my desk, and then I can follow along with whatever happening. That's absolutely a teleconferencing tool for me, which is awesome because that's how I always talk about it, right? For headphones, it should come as no surprise that I use the AirPods Pro. These are hands down the best headphones that I've ever owned. The noise cancellation is very useful when either trying to pay attention to a meeting or when I'm out running, and I don't mean like running errands or anything like that. I mean actually putting one foot in front of the other as fast as I can. One thing that I generally don't like about headphones for running is you can get wind noise in it as you're running by, and it's very distracting. Then you got to turn the volume up to like eardrum damaging levels. But the noise cancellation on the AirPods Pro is good enough to keep that down about as little as I've ever heard. Plus it's now winter and I'm running with a hat on pretty often, and these are so much more comfortable with a hat on than other options I've tried. And finally, when I'm out running, I track that all with my Apple Watch Series 7. Probably would be served just as well with the Series 6, but I actually do like the bigger display on this watch. I always get these smaller versions of the Apple Watch, and while that screen bump sounds small on paper again, it actually makes the watch much easier to see when I'm checking my pace, and it makes it so much easier to use when I'm trying to navigate to a different song while it's like bouncing around all over the place. It's that even that little bit just makes the buttons so much easier to hit. You could also check notifications from here, but since I sit at my home desk all day long, I get those notifications in the least annoying method ever made by man, the macOS notifications bar. Yes, I'm kidding, because that's the worst notification system ever. Mac, fix your notifications. Whew, that was a lot of stuff. But at the end of the day, so what, right? Should you go out and buy all of this stuff to be just like me? No, absolutely not. I have specific needs for each of the things on this list and don't own them just to own them. Well, okay, some of the tech I own to make videos and comparisons about, so those I guess I do own just to own. If you are not a person that makes content on these devices, you gotta really figure out what you need and buy the parts that fit with that. These are all the parts that work really well for me, and I really like them. What's hard is when I have to try out other brands or other products for the channel, it's tough for me to move away from these because of how well they all work together. But what about you? What is your personal ecosystem, Apple or otherwise, and how does it work for you? Let us all know in the comments below because I love hearing about what you all have built. And if you like this video and you're looking for more ideas on how to build your own Apple ecosystem, here's a link to my most useful ecosystem video from a few weeks ago. You can find it by clicking right here. Click, 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 click. Thanks for watching.